You think you want it, but it is desire that wants you. In the dim light of your innermost thoughts, there is something that moves without your command. An impulse, a hunger, a whisper that is born before reason. You believe that you control, that you choose, that you are free. But sometimes, when the night stretches out in silence, you feel it. There is something in you that does not obey. Something that does not shut up. Something that calls. Carl Jung, the man who immersed himself in the human soul as someone who explores deep and forgotten caves, would not point his finger to judge you. He would just shine a flashlight. And in that soft light, you would begin to see what has always been there, hidden, but present. The desire is not only yours. He's older than you. Older than your childhood. Even older than your name. There is a flame in every human being, a warmth that pulsates under the skin, sometimes disguised as love, sometimes with pleasure, and often with shame. Sexual obsession is not a mistake, but a symptom, a calling. Not something wrong with you, but something forgotten. Something that your soul wants to remind you of. You wonder why you think about it so much. Because even trying to forget, the thought returns. Why the body reacts before the mind. Why you feel torn between what you want and what you believe you should want. The answer lies not only in your actions, but in your shadow, that side of you that you avoid, that you repress, that you hide even from yourself. The shadow, according to Jung, is not evil. This is what was denied. It is the piece of your being that you have left behind to be accepted, to be loved, to look strong. But the truth is that what you exclude from yourself comes back with more force. What you push into the basement of consciousness one day goes up the stairs and knocks on your door. And many times, it goes with the name of desire. Wishing is not a problem. The problem is when desire becomes master of the house. When he dictates the rules, he chooses the words, controls the looks. When he transforms you into someone you don't recognize, but who, strangely, seems more alive than the one you pretend to be. Have you ever wondered why certain images get stuck in your memory like tattoos on your soul? Why do some experiences, even quick ones, stay lit for years inside you? Maybe because there, at that moment, you weren't just living the pleasure, you were meeting a piece of yourself that had been asking to be seen for a long time. And even if it came in a crude, clumsy, or even embarrassing way, that moment was true. Genuine. Almost sacred. Jung would say that there are symbols in everything. And sex, in its intensity, is a powerful symbol. Not only from the union of bodies, but from the attempt to unite opposites within us. The masculine and the feminine. The rational and the instinctive. The visible and the hidden. When you surrender to the impulse without awareness, you do not free yourself, you imprison yourself more. But when you look at the desire and listen to it without fear, it can guide you. Not as a tyrant, but as a messenger. Obsession, then, is not the end. It's the beginning of a conversation. It's the cry of something in you that's tired of being ignored. Something that no longer wants to live hidden in the dark corners of your psyche. Something that needs to be acknowledged, not fed blindly, nor destroyed with guilt. Just listened to sincerely. You're not in control because you've never been fully. And that's not a weakness. It's a chance. An opportunity to get to know yourself beyond the masks. In addition to the lies you tell to stay safe. The desire that scares you is the same one that can reveal to you who you really are, with all your contradictions, all your scars, all your truths. And maybe that's precisely why you try to escape. Because deep down, you know, looking in front of this mirror is risky. You may not like what you see. Or worse, you can love what you see. You can recognize yourself. You can understand that what holds you back can also set you free if you have the courage to listen with an open heart. Meanwhile, you continue to live between fear and will, between impulse and repression, between pleasure and guilt. But the way is not to run away, nor surrender to chaos. The way is to integrate, bring light to the shadow, to give voice to what has never had the chance to speak. Only then does desire cease to be an obsession and becomes a force. Vital energy. Creation. It is not a question of eliminating fire, but to learn to warm up with it without burning everything around. Because deep down, what you call a problem can be the gateway to a more whole version of you. And it all starts with a simple but powerful question. Why does it dominate me? The answer will not come from outside. Neither of rules, nor of guilt, nor of dogmas. The answer lies in you. And it's closer than you think. You just need to have the courage to listen. You are not just what you show. You are also everything that you hide. There is an entire universe within you that has never been touched by the light. And it is there that the force that moves you in silence lives. While you live, work, talk, and smile, there is something deep down, waiting for the right moment to emerge. Not to hurt you, but to remind you of who you really are. The desire that consumes you, that impulse that seems uncontrollable, is not an enemy. It's a reflex. A reflection of your lack of listening, of your haste to live only on the surface. When we don't give space to the soul, the body screams. And the cry often comes in the form of urgency, of addiction, of obsession. But what if, for a moment, you stopped running away? What if I looked into the eyes of your most indomitable desire and said, I am here. Talk to me? What would he say? Maybe he would talk about neediness, about abandonment, about the forgotten childhood. Maybe it would talk about the loneliness that you hide so well, even from yourself. Or maybe he just cried, because it never had the right to be seen as part of you. Carl Jung believed that what does not transform into consciousness returns as destiny. And this fate often appears as repetition. You repeat the same behaviors, the same mistakes, the same emptiness disguised as pleasure. And he wonders why. But he does not realize that the answer is not out. It's in what you don't want to hear. It's in your shadow. The shadow is not ugly. She's just hurt. It holds your anger, your shame, your traumas. But also keep your power, your sensitivity, your truth. When you suppress what you feel, it doesn't go away. It just disguises itself. And sometimes, that disguise is meaningless sex, soulless pleasure, touch without presence. You search for bodies like someone looking for water in the desert, but none of them satisfies. Because what you are looking for is not outside. It's inside. You want to touch another's skin, but you actually want to be touched inside. He wants to be seen, recognized, beloved, not for a fantasy, but for the whole thing. With all your flaws, with all your lights. And here is the finer point. When desire dominates, it does not set you free. It imprisons you in a cycle that begins with euphoria and ends in emptiness. You feel pleasure, but then comes silence. And in that silence, something in you screams for meaning, by truth. But the truth hurts, because it requires you to come down. Dive in. That looks inside without a shield. And that's scary. Easier to stay on automatic. Easier to repeat patterns. It is easier to blame the world, others, the body. It is really difficult to assume that the whole is in you, and that only you can go down there. But Jung would say, there is no awakening of consciousness without pain. It is necessary to go through the dark night of the soul to see the sun really rise. And this crossing is not done in one day. Not even with ready-made formulas. It starts when you stop running away. When you decide to look at desire not as a problem, but as a bridge. Desire is a bridge between who you are and who you can become. It carries clues from your unconscious, dreams that have been stifled, wills that were judged, and, above all, emotional needs that you never learned to name. When desire overwhelms you, it's asking for attention. Not satiety, but presence. Perhaps you have learned that wishing is wrong, or that pleasure is sin, or that feeling is weakness. Maybe you grew up hearing that the body is dirty, that touch is dangerous, that the impulse must be castrated. And so you split yourself in two, on one side what you feel, on the other, the one who pretends. And in this division, emptiness was born. But no one lives well broken in half. No one loves well without first loving himself completely. And loving oneself includes accepting desire as part of human existence. Like a river that, if contained too much, overflows. And if I let go too much, it destroys. But if channeled with awareness, it irrigates. It makes it bloom. You don't have to eliminate the craving. You need to understand it. Integrate it. Sit with him at the table. Ask where it comes from. What he wants to show you. which wound is trying to heal, which part of you is asking to live. Because only when you allow yourself to listen, does the desire stop screaming. And then, something changes. You stop being a hostage, and he begins to be master of himself. Not with rigidity, but with presence. You don't kill the impulse, you educate it with love. You don't stifle the energy, you turn it into creation. In art, in conscious touch, in deep look, in a true encounter. And that's when desire stops being an obsession, and it becomes a flame. Not the one that burns and destroys, but the one that warms and illuminates. That guides your steps towards who you really are. Because in the end, desire doesn't want to dominate you. He just wants to be heard. It is not desire that holds you back. It's what you do with it when you don't have the courage to feel it. Have you ever noticed how you run away from yourself all the time? How do you get distracted by noises, faces, screens, and goals, all so you don't hear what's screaming inside? You say you seek pleasure, but deep down you just want anesthesia. A quick relief for a silence that you no longer know how to inhabit. And it is in this silence that your truth lives. Your pain. Your essence. Carl Jung did not speak of desires in order to deny them. He saw them as doors. And every door has two sides. On the one hand, the impulse. On the other, consciousness. What dominates you is not the desire itself. It is what you have not yet understood about it. It's what you try to hide, but that insists on coming back, in forms that are more and more intense, more uncomfortable, more difficult to ignore. You try to beat yourself every day, but you don't realize that war has already tired you. And that perhaps the way is not to win, but to give in. Not to addiction, but to listening. Not to repetition, but to the question, what in me has not yet been accepted? Because obsession is not desire in excess. It is the absence of meaning. It is the symptom of a soul disconnected from its own center. When you live away from who you really are, everything turns into noise. Everything becomes a hurry. Everything becomes a need. Even pleasure becomes a burden. Even the touch becomes a flight. But there is another way. There is a way back. The journey of those who decide, not without pain, to cross their own labyrinth. Jung would call this individuation, the process of becoming whole. To unite the fragmented parts of your psyche. To recognize that you are light and shadow, reason and instinct, body and soul. And on this journey, desire does not disappear. He changes places. He stops being a tyrant and becomes a guide. He stops being a ghost and becomes a messenger. He no longer drags you by the hands. Now, walk beside you, because you have learned to listen to him without fear, to welcome him without guilt, to recognize that he speaks an ancient language, the language of life pulsing in you. You no longer need the excess. It no longer looks for faces that only fill a hole. Now you look them in the eye, and it allows you to be seen, not as a character, but as someone whole, with stories, wounds, desires, and choices. You don't want just the fleeting pleasure anymore. You want the date, the depth, the presence. And it is in this presence that the miracle happens. Desire is transformed. That which once disintegrated you now unites you. What was once compulsion is now clarity. You no longer feel divided. You feel like you've come home. And that this house is your body. It's your soul. It is your silence that now welcomes, instead of frightening. But make no mistake, this path requires courage. Courage to see what no one sees. Courage to love what in you has been taught to reject. Courage to live deeply in a world that offers you superficiality at every corner. Courage to choose what heals you, even when what distracts you seems easier. You're no longer fighting craving. You're dancing with him. He is understanding its rhythms, its signs, its messages. And little by little, desire reveals to you parts of yourself that you didn't even know existed. It shows you that the energy that once misgoverned you can now create. It can heal. You can really love. And then, you realize something fundamental. Desire has always wanted to take you inside. To the center. To the place where you meet what is most authentic in you. That part that doesn't need to hide anything. That he doesn't need to explain himself. That it just is. You walk lighter. Not because he eliminated what he felt, but because he stopped running away. He He stopped judging. It stopped dividing. The obsession lost its strength because it found a listen. And everything that is heard with love loses the desire to scream. Perhaps this is the true meaning of being in control. Not the control of repression, nor that of indulgence, but that of integration. When you know your shadow, it no longer scares you. When you accept your desire, it no longer dominates you. When you accept your path, even if imperfect, you can finally live. Because that's what real living is all about, feeling without getting lost. Desire without getting hurt. To love without annulling yourself. And most of all, allow each impulse to reveal a part of you that still wants to be liberated. Carl Jung didn't come to moralize you. It came to remind you that the unconscious is not an enemy. It's a map. And desire is one of the most powerful trails on this map. He points out where there is still a wound. Where there is still a shortage. Where there is still forgotten power. You're not in control, but now he knows it. And that sets you free. The desire still lives in you. But now, he has a voice. It has a name. It has a place. And you can finally look at yourself with whole eyes. And say, without fear, I recognize myself. I accept myself. And I'm ready to live what I am. You've spent your whole life trying to protect yourself from yourself. Every hasty choice, every relationship that didn't last, every uncomfortable silence after pleasure, all of this was no accident. It was strategy. It was defense. Because facing what's inside you is a risk that few accept to take. And not because they lack courage, but because it hurts. Yes, the truth hurts. It hurts to recognize that the obsession with pleasure may be just a stifled scream. That behind the body you so desire, there is a child in you who just wanted to be touched with care. That between hurried kisses and empty nights, what you're really looking for is a home. Not a place, but a feeling. Carl Jung said that what we do not face within ourselves we end up finding as destiny. And maybe that's why you always come back to the same point. Like a traveler who, even traveling 1,000 paths, always ends up at the same crossroads, between what he feels and what he pretends not to feel. But today, now, you are here. And being here is a sign that something in you is tired of running away. He is tired of cycles. He got tired of hiding behind masks and impulses. He got tired of using his body as a shield, when, in fact, his body only wanted to be a bridge. You realize that it's not the lack of pleasure that hurts. It is the lack of meaning. Because pleasure can be intense, but if it is not true, if it is not whole, it turns into heavy silence. A silence that comes after the touch, after the sigh, after the rush. And in that silence, something in you falls apart. Not through fault, but by absence. Soullessness. Absence of meaning. Absence of self. And then, without realizing it, you turn desire into escape. Flee from anguish, doubt, neediness. Run away from who you really are. But desire is wise. It does not disappear. It comes back. It always comes back. Because he doesn't want to punish you. He wants to remind you. Remember that there is something in you asking for life. But life is not found in excess, nor in abstinence. It is in listening. You begin to understand that the desire that insists on coming back is not a mistake. He is a messenger. He says, look within. See what you're trying to forget. And what you see is often scary. You find old fears. He finds traumas. He finds voids that he did not know were there. But he also finds something else. Something more subtle, softer, more essential. He finds tenderness. He finds sensitivity. Find love. Yes, at the center of desire there is love. Not romantic, idealized, perfect love. But love for you. The love that heals what has been rejected. That welcomes what has been forgotten. Who looks kindly at parts of you that no one taught you to love. This love is not immediate. He does not arrive in a hurry. It builds itself. It is cultivated. You learn. It arises when you choose to no longer be divided. When you understand that there is nothing wrong with feeling. That desire is not the enemy of the soul. It is the invitation to know it. You realize that what held you back was not the impulse, but the fear. Fear of being fragile. Fear of needing. Fear of not being enough. And then you filled the time, the body, the mind, everything but the heart. And now, at this point on the road, the emptiness that once scared you begins to show you something else. It starts showing you space. Because only in the void can the new be born. Only in silence can the soul be heard. Only in the pause can you hear what is true. And the real one sometimes whispers. But he whispers strongly. He says, you don't have to prove yourself anymore. You just need to allow yourself. Allow yourself to feel without judging. Allow desire without punishing yourself. Allow yourself to be without hiding. You start breathing differently. He starts playing differently. He begins to look at himself more tenderly. And desire, which once seemed wild, now seems human. It no longer comes as an urgency. It comes as a dance. How do I meet? How to share? Because desire, when it matures, becomes presence. It is no longer the fire that consumes, but the flame that warms. It's no longer an absence of control. It's a conscious choice. It's knowing what you feel. And above all, to know what you deserve. You don't just deserve pleasure. You deserve fullness. You deserve a love that doesn't divide you between body and soul. That he doesn't ask you to hide your depth in exchange for a moment. That recognizes you as a whole, with your desires, your shadows, your history. And above all, you deserve to recognize yourself. Not as someone who needs to be saved, but as someone who is awakening. Waking up to himself. Awakening to a new way of living what you feel. Carl Jung pointed out that the soul does not want to be healed. She wants to be heard. And when she hears it, she finds her way back home. Maybe that's what you're doing right now. Returning. Slowly. Deeply. Gamely. You are no longer in control. But now he understands that he never had to be. The control was just a disguise of fear. And the fear is now being crossed. Crossed with awareness. With truth. With love. And in this crossing, you find what you have always been looking for. It had not been. But inside. In the most intimate place. More forgotten. More alive. What you feel is not wrong. But the way he tries to hide. Maybe it's what hurts you the most. You have learned to desire in silence. He learned to dream with intensity, but without depth. It has repressed its instincts on the surface of morals, but inside, they scream. And they don't scream out of anger. They scream for recognition. Because every impulse carries a story. And every badly told story repeats itself in cycles, until someone has the courage to listen. Your obsession is not a mistake. It's an attempt. A blind search for a part of you that was silenced too soon. You grew up hearing that feeling was dangerous. That wishing was a sin. That the body was shame. And then, without knowing it, you created chasms. One between what he feels and what he shows. Another between what he wants and what he allows. And perhaps the deepest, between who you are and who you pretend to be. But the soul is insistent. She doesn't accept masks for a long time. When you repress what is essential, it finds other ways out. Sometimes by dream, other times by desire, and in many, by pain. Because what you reject within yourself becomes everything that pursues you the most. Carl Jung said that nothing has more power over us than what we avoid facing. And perhaps what controls you most is not the desire itself, but the silence around it. You feel it, but you don't know how to name it. He wishes, but he doesn't know why. And he blames himself for not being able to stop. But stop what exactly? The body? The mind? Or the pain that was not allowed to exist? There comes a time when the intensity is no longer pleasurable. It becomes weight. What was once an escape is now a prison. And what was once freedom is now routine. You begin to realize that repeating is not the same as living. That satiating is not the same as feeling. And that emptiness, although avoided, always returns. But what if emptiness is not your enemy? What if it goes to the door? The door to the real encounter with yourself. The one you always avoided because you knew it would change everything. The kind of encounter that fires masks, dismantles characters, and reveals what you really need: presence. Completion. You begin to realize that desire can be a channel, but it can also be distraction. It can be light or noise. And the difference between the two is in consciousness. Because when you surrender without being present, something breaks. But when you feel it with your body and soul, something heals. And that's when the desire changes tone. It becomes slower, more sincere. He doesn't have to scream anymore, because now you hear it. You acknowledge the thirst, but you also acknowledge the source. And it is not in others. It's in you. You begin to see desire as a language. An old way of saying, I'm alive. But now, this life that pulsates is not urgent. It is presence. It's careful. It's choice. You no longer desire out of need. You want connection. And this connection is born, first, between you and yourself. Jung spoke of the integration of being, to unite shadow and light, body and spirit, reason and intuition. And maybe what you're doing now, without knowing it, is this integration. You are no longer fighting what you feel. It is approaching with respect, with listening, with love. Love, by the way, is what transforms everything. Because when there is love, desire does not need to dominate. It can belong. It may be. He can express himself without fear. And you can feel guilt-free. You can choose without anxiety. It can live deeply. You don't want 1,000 meaningless touches anymore. You want a look that sees you beyond your skin. He no longer wants the cycle of euphoria and emptiness. He wants the dance between pleasure and meaning, between impulse and presence, between freedom and truth. And this is where something breaks, but it's a good break. A necessary break. The old idea that you need to hide your hunger or feed it blindly dissolves. And in its place something new is born, discernment. You start choosing with your heart awake, with the conscious body, with the whole soul. Not because someone said what is right, but because you feel it. Feel what nourishes, what builds, which doesn't take you away from yourself. The obsession now loses its strength, because he found listening. And everything that is heard with love, I repeat, ceases to scream. You are no longer in control in the old sense of the word, but you are in presence. It's on the way. It is in itself. And that's enough. That's all. Sexuality does not need to be tamed. It needs to be understood. And when it is understood, it flourishes as art, as a language, like living poetry in the body, like a temple where the sacred and instinct meet, not as opposites, but as parts of the same flame. Do you feel that? This flame that burns but does not burn, that illuminates but does not blind, that guides but does not impose. That is your vital energy, and it belongs to you. Now you breathe. Profound. For the first time, perhaps, he breathes without guilt. Feel without fear. He lives lightly. For what dwelt in secret dwells with you now lives in the light. And in that light, you no longer need to hide. Carl Jung didn't want you to repress yourself. He wanted you to recognize yourself, to look inside with sincere eyes. And he said, I am that too. And by saying, by accepting, by integrating, you free yourself. The desire is still there, but now he has a home, and that address is you.